Schools in Australia aren't teaching kids how to think anymore, but rather what they are allowed to think. I've just recently left my school as of about 6 months ago, and what I found is that the school is now talking about me in a rather disrespectful way and having senior meetings with the kids and telling them not to believe Andre's political opinions because he's an extremist or rather a neo-Nazi, like what the headlines have been calling me. But they've also been ramping up the left-wing propaganda in the schools, and they've been teaching the kids that one nation is not a good option. But from what I remember when at my time of high school is that teachers aren't allowed to push their respective political opinions onto the students. So it's awfully hypocritical now that as I've left and 6 months later I'm doing somewhat okay and making the news for influencing political opinions, they're giving an alternative view of me to the students. Instead of the school telling the kids to form their own political opinion and form their own policies that they think resonates with them, the school is doubling down on communist-style teaching through Aboriginal propaganda and left-wing ideologies. Which when you think about it is low-key kind of aura for me, because these teachers are essentially 30 to 50 years old, and about 6 months after Ausmaxx has graduated from school, they're having board meetings about me and criticizing me. I'd also heard stories that students in prep and grade 1 are forced to recite the welcome to country at every single class. Now this might all seem good in theory or whatever, but as a matter of fact, it's indoctrination to another level. These kids are majority Anglo-Saxon and European students, and being forced to do these welcome to countries at such a young age is straight up indoctrination. The whole thing is sort of just guilt-tripping the students for existing. Welcome to country and land acknowledgements have been treated as they are some sort of inclusive thing, but rather when they bring up British history and the British founding of Australia, it's taught as something rather of guilt. For example, rather than celebrating the great things the British and the Anglo-Saxons brought this modern country of Australia, they disregard them. And they push this narrative that the British just came and they rocked up and they just slaughtered all the Aboriginals, which is simply not true. They actually got along for quite a fair bit of time. They leave out the fact that the Aboriginal peoples had immense tribal warfare and the fact that their technological gap was so large compared to the Europeans, and the fact that almost every country and continent had already been conquered and it was just waiting for one of the European powers to come to Australia. And whether that be the French or the Portuguese or the Spanish, I guarantee you it would have been much worse off for the Aboriginals if it wasn't for the British. Kids are getting told that questioning mass immigration and the demographic replacement of the Australian people is something that is rather not tolerant and that you can't and not allowed to share within the classroom. But it is in contrary to what the left-wing ideologies are allowed to express within the classroom, such as transgenderism and LGBTQ propaganda. They're all welcomed within the classroom, but if you talk about immigration or demographic change, that is something that is cut off. The majority culture is always cut off and scrutinized, while the minorities are celebrated and encouraged. But this is in contrary, as white people make up only 8 to 12% of the world's population. So as a matter of fact, we are the minority. Climate panic is constant within the classrooms. Kids are coming back home freaking out that the world is ending because their teachers told them some climate change bullshit and that the world is simply going to end unless they don't reduce their water or something like that, even though they're just a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. Teachers who call students disgraces for talking about issues which is of different political opinion to theirs, they aren't actual educators, they're rather political officers. And remember, this all starts with students reciting the welcome to country maybe 6 times a day like the grade 1 students are doing. And then it builds up to when they are teenagers, to where if you have a different opinion to someone, you're automatically a racist. Parents need to start asking the real question, which is what the hell are the teachers teaching their kids?